10, 9, ignition sequence.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
1, 0, and liftoff.
And mission complete, Houston. After serving the world for over 30 years, the space shuttle's earned its place in history and it's come to a final stop.
We begin with the final preparations for the historic launch of China's manned spacecraft, the Shenzhou 9. So far, everything is going on smoothly. The Tiangong-1 China Space Lab orbiting the Earth has changed its path and is now in place to welcome the Shenzhou 9. And for the first time, the tricky docking procedure involves a manned spacecraft. David Keaton starts us off.
Beijing closely monitoring the path of the Tiangong-1 and Shenzhou 9 ready for launch in Jiuquan. Tiangong-1 has been in orbit since September 2011. In November, China's first space docking procedure was conducted with the Shenzhou 8. Now it's time for people to man this space lab. Meanwhile, at the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center, technicians have been running numerous tests on the Shenzhou 9 spacecraft and its carrier rocket, the Long March 2F. The spacecraft and its rocket were moved to the launch pad on Saturday. Experts and technicians are paying special attention to an escape tower at the top of the capsule. It's an emergency separation device, vital in case something goes wrong. But natural conditions are not making things easy. In Jiuquan at this time of year, it's hot, yet the engine for the escape tower needs to be kept between 10 and 30 degrees Celsius.
We need to supply cold wind 10 hours before the launch till we remove the escape tower's exposure suits 90 minutes prior to the launch.
Technicians are also testing the air conditioning system used to cool down the capsule before the launch, and therefore it's essential to create a good environment.
Once the astronauts enter the capsule, an inside recycling system will collect their heat and dissipate it via a ground temperature regulation system that will keep the temperature inside human-friendly.
Over the next few days, scientists will conduct tests on the spacecraft and the rocket, as well as final tests on selected astronauts, spacecraft, rocket and ground systems. David Keaton, CCTV.
And of course, Shenzhou 9 will be different from previous Chinese manned space missions. Instead of just sending astronaut into the Earth orbit, it will be headed for Tiangong-1, China's first space lab. And now let's take a look at the candidates for the forthcoming mission. Well, thousands have actually stepped forward, and they've now been whittled down to just 6 of them. And 3 of them will have the chance to go into space. One of them will be a female. Well, it will be the first time China has ever sent a female astronaut into space. Well, Liu Yang and Wang Yaping, the 2 hopefuls, are both fighter jet pilots with a wealth of flight experiences and also have taken part in a series of important rescue operations before. Privacy will be protected for the female astronaut as 2 different sleeping areas will be set up for them to be used. And female astronauts must be married moms. So who will they be? The final decision will be made closer to launch time. And the Shenzhou 9 and the carrier rocket have already been transferred to the launch pad for the final mission. And our reporter Wang Yizhi earlier told us about the preparations for the long-awaited mission.
One of the preparations that is catching the most attention is that the preparations of the astronauts. From the information I'm getting here from the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center is that all of the candidates is in good health. They're staying in Wentiangge, a place where to spend their last days on the ground before the Shenzhou 9 is launched. And big news is that there will be 1 female astronaut on board. This is the first of its kind in China's history. She will serve as a mission expert, which means she will be performing a series of scientific experiments on board in the space. And the other 2 male astronauts will perform flying, rendezvous, and docking part of this mission. So if this is successful, it will make history. As for the preparations of that rocket, earlier today in the morning, a electricity recharge test is run, because the importance of this part is that the battery on board will be providing power for the rendezvous and docking, as well as the life and work of those astronauts on board.
letzten EM-Auftritt der deutschen Elf wollten sich 22 Millionen Fans gestern nicht entgehen lassen. Sie hingen gebannt vor dem Fernseher. Und da sind nicht mal die mitgezählt, die das Spiel beim Public Viewing verfolgt haben. Das 1:0 von Jogi Löws Team war der eine Grund zur Freude. Der andere, dass wieder Deutsche und Portugiesen, Dänen und Holländer gemeinsam friedlich gefeiert haben bei diesem Euro-Sommermärchen. Gesa Eberl mit den Bildern und dem Gesang.
Einigkeit und Recht und Freiheit
für das deutsche Vaterland.
Danach lasst uns alle streben, brüderlich mit Herz und Hand.
Endlich können wir wieder Flagge zeigen in der großen Masse, wo das Gemeinschaftsgefühl am schönsten zu spüren ist. So kamen 400.000 Fußballfans auf Deutschlands größte Fanmeile nach Berlin. Andere suchten die Gruppendynamik auf Privatpartys, wie hier in Leipzig, oder direkt beim befreundeten Gegner, dem Portugiesen nebenan, wie hier in Hamburg. Da war der Ausgang des Spiels noch unklar.
1:1. 2:1 für Portugal. Ich bin für die Türkei und denke, das wird 8:0 ausgehen.
Doch dann im Spiel endlich der entscheidende Kopfstoß. Ein kleiner Moment, aber ein großer kollektiver Glücksrausch im ganzen Land. Herkunft egal an diesem Abend, wir sind ein Land. Im Siegestaumel, als wären wir schon Europameister. Immerhin sind wir ja dem EM-Titel damit auch einen entscheidenden Schritt näher. Aber wie war eigentlich das Spiel?
Bommels hat ein richtig gutes Tor geschossen, war gut.
Deutschland hat gewonnen, wa?
Total toll. Also das Tor war 1A. Ich bin fast durchgedreht.
Das war gut.
Und was sagen die Deutsch-Portugiesen als wirklich faire Verlierer?
Die Deutschen waren halt überlegen, aber trotzdem leider verloren.
Es war leider das falsche Tor, aber mein Gott.
Ich habe gedacht, der Ball geht rein, aber immer daneben.
Alles andere als daneben war dieser Stimmungsknaller-Auftakt für Deutschland in einer dafür perfekt milden Nacht. Nur noch 3 Tage, Holland kann kommen, wir sind eingestimmt und vorbereitet.
Aber haben Sie Deutschland auch schon mal von oben angeschaut, aus der Vogelperspektive? Ein neuer Kinofilm macht's möglich. Schauen Sie mal.
Was aussieht wie eine Mondlandschaft, ist der Braunkohleabbau in der Lausitz. Regensburg sieht aus wie eine Spielzeugstadt. Und das ist nicht die Südsee, sondern die Halligen der Nordsee. Der Film Deutschland von oben zeigt, aus der Luft sieht vieles ganz anders aus, fast fremd. Das beweist auch unser Test mit Passanten in der Lübecker Innenstadt.
Sagen Sie bloß, das ist jetzt hier in Lübeck, ich weiß es nicht.
Durchaus interessant, das mal aus einer anderen Perspektive zu sehen. Man sieht mehr, als wenn man so durch die Straße läuft.
Die Zugspitze im Schnee, schön wie ein Märchenschloss. 360 Stunden hat Regisseur Freddy Röckenhaus aus der Vogelperspektive drehen lassen.
Das Interessante ist, dass der Pilot im Grunde genommen das Bild ungefähr genauso mitbestimmt, wie der Kameramann es bestimmt. Es ist also sehr wichtig, dass der Pilot die richtigen Flugbewegungen macht, weil man sonst eigentlich nur die Kufen des Hubschraubers ständig im Bild hat.
Wer einen neuen Blick auf Vertrautes werfen will, der sollte Deutschland von oben anschauen. Ab heute in unseren Kinos.
Huntsville Station on 1.
This is Mission Control Houston. Good morning to you, everyone, and welcome to the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center. This is today's ISS update. It is Monday, June 11th, 2012.
Pick back up.
The crew on board the space station is busy working on a series of experiments and routine maintenance work. The team down here on Earth is being led today by Flight Director Royce Renfrew. He is standing up there. He is joined by the Capcom today, which is veteran astronaut Sandy Magnus. She herself lived on board the space station complex, also flew the last space shuttle mission, STS-135. Today is her actual final day of training as a Capcom, so we'll be seeing her face and hearing her voice a bit more here inside Mission Control. Today, the 3 Russian crew members, including Oleg Kononenko, Gennady Padalka, and Sergei Revin, are spending some time observing Russia Day, which is a holiday for our colleagues in Russia. that recognizes national pride and social and economic achievements throughout history. Of course, there are many from that nation, the space program, not the least of which gets recognized on Russia Day. Joe Akaba, one of the flight engineers on board, is performing a quarterly inspection of one of the onboard treadmills. Those treadmills are an important piece of equipment for the crew to use each and every day.
Give me a quick brief.
It requires some upkeep up there on board, so he is taking care of that today. He is also doing some work on what is called the Combustion Integrated Rack, or the CIR. This rack, including its twin, which is the Fluid Integrated Rack, are large pieces of experiment hardware on board the space station. The Combustion Integrated Rack is used to perform combustion experiments, just like its name sounds, up in space. It's fairly large. It has a 100-liter combustion chamber, which you see the majority of there, and 5 different cameras that the crew and also the ground teams can use to see the different experiments that are inside.
I'll just leave it at the maximum of 10.
The crew actually helps maintain the racks and the fuel bottles, which are mounted down below, that provide the fuel to burn inside the rack. But the actual experiments themselves are run from the ground, so they're remote controlled. Akaba also spending some time moving cargo out of the automated transfer vehicle that is still docked with the station back there on the Russian segment. That ATV, which is called the Amaldi, came up back in March and docked with the International Space Station. You see this very large spacecraft here with its X-wing solar arrays, which set it apart from other vehicles. It's going to spend the next several months attached to the station. It brought up more than 7 tons of supplies for the crew, so they've been spending the last several weeks and a couple of months unloading it. They will continue this throughout the summer and then pack it full of trash and other items that they don't need anymore. And ultimately, coming up in August, September, or at the end of the summer, that ATV will be undocked from the station and sent into a destructive reentry in the Earth's atmosphere. This ATV is the 3rd of the ATVs that have come up to the station complex.
Put the ignition in work.
Andre Kuipers is working on some routine work inside Kibo on the ventilation system. This is some routine maintenance work that he and the rest of the crew have to do throughout the entire space station complex on the different modules there. He will take care of that and take some photos of his work and send that down to the ground team so they can verify that everything has been done according to plan. He's also working on what's called the Integrated Cardiovascular Ambulatory Monitoring Experiment. Obviously, the human body is one of the main focuses of station experiments to find out what happens to us as we're up in space for extended periods of time. These lessons learned from the space station will be important as humans venture beyond low Earth orbit to destinations such as an asteroid or back to the moon or the moons of Mars or whatever it may be. This particular experiment has the crew member wear a device that monitors blood pressure for 24 hours. After that takes place, then they basically do the same thing with an EKG machine, which records electrocardiogram signals from the heart. All this is put together to find out exactly what happens to us up there on board the space station. And finally, Don Pettit is working on an experiment called BASS. This stands for Burning and Suppression of Solids up in Space. It's an interesting experiment, sort of like the Combustion Integrated Rack. It takes a look at how things burn in space. Fire behaves extremely differently inside the weightless environment of the International Space Station. What BASS actually takes a look at is how do you extinguish fires up in space? Because the accepted theory is that here on Earth, the way a flame behaves, that you aim the fire suppression or the extinguisher down at the base of the flame, which is where the flame is basically created, and also serves as its stabilization point. But that may be a bit different up in space. So this BASS experiment takes a look at that, how the fire behaves, and how someone would put that out up there in space. This is Mission Control Houston, and good morning to you, everyone. This is a live view inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center. We want to welcome you to today's ISS update. It is Tuesday, June 12th, 2012. Today's flight director standing up there in the middle is Royce Renfrew. Sitting beside him is Hal Getzelman. He is today's Capcom. He's the one that's going to be speaking with the crew during this entire Orbit 2 shift. The crew on board the station, meanwhile, as members of Expedition 31, have a fairly light day today. They're observing Russia Day, just like they did yesterday, but today's the day that they actually get some off-duty time. Russia Day is a holiday that recognizes national pride and social and economic achievements throughout history for that country. So the crew is taking some time just to have some downtime on board the station. There's a few just routine maintenance activities and also some checkups of some of the experiments that are on board. But all in all, they've got some off-duty time today. Even though the crew is taking it a bit easy today, Joe Akaba and Don Pettit, two members of Expedition 31, have been busy working on what's called the CEDRA. This is the carbon dioxide removal assembly. There's two actually on board, one there inside the Destiny laboratory and then one inside the Tranquility module. Late yesterday afternoon, this particular CEDRA that's inside Destiny turned off. It went down. Because of a faulty temperature sensor. There's 3 inside one of the beds that actually scrubs the air of carbon dioxide. While one of those beds is doing that, the other one is actually being regenerated, dumping everything and basically being baked off so it can be used again. So what the crew is doing in order to get this carbon dioxide removal assembly back up and running is rewiring some of those sensors and getting that started back up while the ground team here in Houston watches over them. While this is taking place, the CEDRA that's inside Tranquility is up and running, so everything's working fine in terms of the atmosphere on board the station, but this Destiny CEDRA is the primary one that they typically use. So they're going to get it back up and running and get that thing operational once more. Later on today, the crew's going to have their daily planning conference. So they have one of these in the morning, one of these in the afternoon, where they will talk with the ground teams around the world, talk about today's activities as well as plan ahead for tomorrow. There's a shot of the crew there, Joe Akaba there on the far left, Gennady Podolka there on the second to the left, and Sergei Revin there third from the left. This crew came up to the station back in May. They'll stay until September. So they were the newest members of Expedition 31. On the right half of the screen, Don Pettit there on the far right, Ole Kononenko second from the right, and Andrei Kuipers there in the middle. That crew has been on board the space station since December of 2011, and they are getting ready to come home here in just a matter of a couple of weeks. They're due to land just to the northeast of Zhezkazgan, Kazakhstan, coming up on Sunday, July 1st. Of course, we'll have live coverage of all that here on NASA television around 3:15 a.m. Central Time. That's the specific landing time, 4:15 a.m. Eastern Time.
Okay, Clay.
This is Mission Control Houston. Welcome to today's ISS update. It is Wednesday, June 13th, 2012, and this is a live view inside the flight control room for the space station. Today, this team here is being led by Flight Director Paul Dye, who is sitting there in the middle in the blue shirt. Right beside him in the green shirt is Clay Anderson. He is serving as today's Capcom. The crew has been very busy today. They had a slightly off-duty day yesterday.
Houston flight, I just want to say that it was a good exercise.
The crew has been working this morning on a number of different experiments and other maintenance activities on board. Ole Kononenko started his day working on a Russian experiment that studies the veins in the lower extremities down in the astronauts and cosmonauts' legs. As we talk about quite a bit on here, the human body is an area of intense focus for the ground teams and researchers that try to find out how we react to being up in space. The crew, specifically Kononenko and Andrei Kuipers and Don Pettit, also checked out their Soyuz that's going to be bringing them home here in just a couple of weeks. They got in their Soyuz seat liners, which are custom made for each one of them, to make sure that they still fit and are okay to support the landing. The human body actually gets a little bit taller in space, especially whenever you're up there for about 6 months. So each of the crews checks out their seats and measures everything and just makes sure that they're still good to go to support the upcoming landing. Kononenko, Kuipers, and Don Pettit are going to be landing coming up on Sunday, July 1st, around 3:15 a.m. Central Time. Of course, we'll have live coverage here on NASA television. Gennady Podolka worked inside the Russian segment on an electromagnetic experiment called Kulanovsky crystal. The basic examination of this is to look at the electrostatic interaction between electrically charged particles. So he worked on that and reported those results down to the ground teams. Podolka, as well as Sergei Revin, also worked together on an education experiment that looks at the complete gas-to-liquid phase separation of fine dispersion particles up there in space. Joe Akaba also reviewed procedures for the upcoming test of the amine swing bed. This is a new prototype for the carbon dioxide removal system that will be used on the Orion spacecraft coming up in the future. The point of this is to test out brand new technology on that amine swing bed that basically makes it more efficient and much smaller than what is currently up on board the International Space Station. Throughout the years, these carbon dioxide removal assemblies have gotten smaller and worked a bit better and more efficient. Of course, Orion does not have the space of the International Space Station and will be going on much longer journeys, so smaller is better, and the space station is the perfect place to test out that technology coming up here in the future. Akaba also had a hand pass with St. Anne's Primary School near Sydney, Australia. He talked with some elementary and middle school students about life on board the station to find out what it's like to work on board the orbiting complex, and the students asked him what kind of food that the crew eats and what they do every day. He also worked on the capillary flow experiment that looks at how liquids and solids interact in zero-G. That's an ongoing experiment that has been conducted throughout several expeditions. Andre Kuipers worked on some of the water on-off valves in the Columbus laboratory. You're seeing some footage of that from earlier today. That activity took up the majority of his morning. Later on today, he's also going to work on the integrated cardiovascular ambulatory monitoring experiment, which is something that he's done all week long. This takes a look at how the cardiovascular system reacts to being up in space. As we talked about, the human body is one of the main experiments on board. So that experiment has been monitoring his blood pressure throughout the week, as well as some EKG signals, much like you would find in a doctor's office here on Earth. Don Pettit worked on a rack called the Multi-Purpose Small Payload Rack. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's in the Kibo laboratory. It has 2 different workspaces and 1 workbench, and can hold all kinds of equipment, supplies, and power for the experiments that take place in that rack. There's also a way for that rack to be communicated directly with the ground, and there's some video equipment on board so the ground teams can monitor the experiments on board. But it's basically a plug-and-play rack, so anything that needs to go in there can. And he was doing some routine maintenance on the quick disconnects that are part of the combustion chamber there. And then earlier today, the entire crew, which you're hearing a debrief of now, conducted a routine fire drill on board. This happens periodically on board, where they simulate what would happen if a fire occurred. There's 3 different main emergencies that the crew does train and focus for, fire being one of them. Toxicity or some sort of toxic chemical release is another one, and of course depressurization is the 3rd and final one. So what they do is they reenact what would happen if a fire actually occurred on board. They don their masks and their safety devices, and the ground teams work with them. And then what they do is they have a quick chat with the ground teams here in Houston that you're hearing now to talk about how it went and to suggest improvements for the future.
Es ist auch klar, dass die Astronomen sich den Röntgenblick ins All nicht entgehen lassen wollen, denn damit lässt sich nicht nur die Sonne, sondern alles Hochexplosive gut beobachten. Heute startet das NASA-Röntgenteleskop NuSTAR ins All.
Kosmische Abgründe. Schwarze Löcher verschlingen Staub und Gas. Das angesaugte Material wird dabei verdichtet und so heiß, dass es Röntgenstrahlung abgibt. Astronomen nennen sie den Todesschrei der Materie. Auch eine kosmische Röntgenquelle. Ein Stern explodiert am Ende seines Lebens als Supernova. Wo immer es im Universum kracht und viel Energie frei wird, entsteht Röntgenlicht. Deshalb suchen Astronomen danach. Doch die großen Parabolspiegel, die bei anderen Teleskopen die schwachen Signale bündeln sollen, wirken bei den energiereichen Röntgenstrahlen nicht. Die durchdringen den Spiegel einfach oder werden verschluckt. Ein Röntgenteleskop nutzt einen Trick. Wie ein Stein, der übers Wasser springen soll, prallen die Röntgenstrahlen ganz flach am Spiegel ab und werden so auf einen Kamerachip gebündelt, in einigen Metern Entfernung. Röntgenteleskope sind also entsprechend lang. Um Störungen durch die Atmosphäre zu vermeiden, muss man sie als Satellit in eine Erdumlaufbahn bringen. Und wegen ihrer Größe braucht man dazu schweres Gerät. Zum Beispiel das Space Shuttle Columbia, das 1999 das 13 Meter lange Röntgenteleskop Chandra aussetzte. Doch das Shuttle ist ausrangiert. Eine kostengünstige Alternative bietet dieses umgebaute Passagierflugzeug. In 11 Kilometern Höhe klingt es eine Rakete aus, die den Satellit auf 600 Kilometer in seine Umlaufbahn bringt. Aber der Platz in der Rakete ist begrenzt. Wie bringt man 10 Meter Teleskop in 2 Metern Raketenspitze unter? Die Lösung für das neueste Röntgenteleskop NuSTAR: die Linse hängt an einem Ausleger, der erst in der Erdumlaufbahn ausgefahren wird. Ein solcher Start kostet übrigens 36 Millionen US-Dollar. Ein Shuttle-Start dagegen über eine halbe Milliarde. Verglichen mit früheren Röntgenteleskopen erwarten die Astronomen 10-mal schärfere Aufnahmen, vor allem von harter, also besonders energiereicher Röntgenstrahlung von superschweren schwarzen Löchern. Astronomen vermuten diese kosmischen Schwergewichte in den Zentren vieler Galaxien. Auf den neuen hochauflösenden Röntgenbildern sollten also auch weit entfernte Galaxien zu sehen sein. NuSTAR soll den Himmel nach solchen Röntgenquellen absuchen. So wollen die Astronomen besser verstehen, wie die Galaxien im All verteilt sind. Und wenn ein Stern explodiert, kann NuSTAR in weniger als 24 Stunden die Explosionswolken aufnehmen. Solche Supernovae bergen noch viele Geheimnisse und sie bilden die Grundlage unserer Existenz. In solchen Explosionen entstanden fast alle chemischen Elemente im Universum. Auch die Kohlenstoffatome. Bausteine des Lebens auf der Erde.
There's more to the universe than meets the eye. So NASA is going to launch an observatory called NuSTAR to see some of the things we've been missing. NuSTAR stands for Nuclear Spectroscopic Telescope Array, and it's designed to give astronomers unprecedented looks at some of the highest energy objects in the universe, from stars that recently exploded to black holes.
And we are going to open up the high energy window on the universe. NuSTAR is going to teach us fundamental things about the universe, from what heats the corona of the sun or the atmosphere of the sun, to understanding black holes distributed across the universe.
One of NuSTAR's goals is to count the black holes in the universe, a survey that has never been done before and is expected to reveal a new scale for the cosmos.
We think that 2 out of 3 black holes in the universe are hidden.
Instead of looking at visible light the way a traditional telescope does, NuSTAR is equipped with specialized equipment that will see what are known as hard X-rays. Produced by extremely violent events in the universe, hard X-rays are similar to the X-rays dentists use to look into teeth.
And so it's much like Galileo 400 years ago was the first person to focus visible light with his first telescope. NuSTAR is the first instrument that's going to focus high-energy X-ray light. And this buys us more than 10 times sharper images, more than 100 times more sensitive pictures, and allows us to study some of the most energetic phenomena across the universe.
For as big a task as it's taking on, the NuSTAR Observatory is not very large.
Compared to a Juno or an MSL, it's a lot smaller. It is about 350 kilograms, about the size of a refrigerator, or a little less. And it's compact, but it only has one basic instrument on the spacecraft itself, where other spacecraft, the larger ones, have multiple instruments on them.
A Pegasus rocket, the smallest available to NASA's Launch Services program, is to lift NuSTAR into Earth orbit.
Pegasus is our most unique rocket, period. If you take a look at it, it's got a wing on it, which you know, the rest of our ELV launch vehicles don't. The next thing you notice is it's hanging off the bottom of an L-1011 a carrier aircraft, which is quite unique also. And then to top it off, the way we launch it is we drop it just like you would a weapon or a bomb. And then this thing lights off 5 seconds later and scoots in front of the L-1011. It's unique in all kinds of aspects.
Launching from an airplane add another aspect of critical timing for the launch team to consider.
You got to be at the right place at the right point at the right time, and everything's got to mesh to be able to do that correctly. So as far as my launch director role in keeping the team in sync and so forth, this is our most challenging type of mission. It's also one of our funner type missions because of that.
The New Star spacecraft will launch from an island in the Pacific Ocean called Kwajalein, part of the Ronald Reagan test site.
So New Star has some particular requirements to be around the equatorial orbit so they can do observations of the science they want to perform. Well, Kwajalein is not really a launch site. It's more of a receive kind of type of site where with the Pegasus, we're taking in on L-1011, we're bringing the rocket to them, and we'll go off and we'll fly it off the L-1011.
Once flying on its own in orbit, New Star will deploy a solar array to produce power. Later, New Star will extend a 33-foot-long span with sensors on one end that will capture X-rays so astronomers can see what's out there.
And we have a set of planned observations of things that we're very safely sure we're going to see. But the big excitement is we might see things that are unexpected. We're going to have to keep our eyes open to see things that we weren't expecting to see.
This is Pegasus Launch Control at T-minus 2 hours and counting. Preparations are underway for the launch of the Orbital Sciences Pegasus XL rocket carrying NASA's New Star spacecraft. The call to stations for the launch team was at 7 a.m. this morning, and the launch countdown began at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time at T-minus 4 hours. The time from the L-1011's departure until the drop of the Pegasus rocket is 60 minutes, and the launch window available to us today is 4 hours in duration. Weather-wise, we have no significant clouds or weather. The forecast today calls for only a 1% chance or even less, so almost no chance of having a launch weather issue during our countdown today in the drop box location. So at this time, from a weather standpoint, we are completely green. The University of California at Berkeley is responsible for the operation of the spacecraft, and the California Institute of Technology, or Caltech, is responsible for the mission science. Both the Pegasus XL rocket and the New Star spacecraft were built by Orbital Sciences Corporation. This will be the 41st launch of a Pegasus rocket, the 13th for NASA, and this is the third launch from Kwajalein Atoll in the Marshall Islands for NASA's Launch Services program. This is Pegasus Launch Control, T-minus 1 hour, 35 minutes, 54 seconds and counting. Joining us now here in the Mission Director Center is Al Sierra, the Director of the Flight Projects Office for NASA's Launch Services program. And Al is going to talk to us some about what we've done to get the Pegasus and the New Star ready for the flight. And Al, this really goes back quite some time because most of the work was done out at California at Vandenberg Air Force Base much earlier this year. I think they got started getting things ready to fly. But Al, we're going to show some video, and if you could talk us through what we're seeing.
Absolutely, George. Okay, so here we're seeing the Pegasus launch vehicle in building 1555, which is located at Vandenberg Air Force Base in California. You see the technicians there getting various parts of the rocket assembled. This rocket is assembled in the horizontal orientation as opposed to some rockets that are put together in a vertical. Right now you see they're installing the aft skirt that is part of the first stage of the vehicle. As you know, Pegasus is very unique in the sense that it's the only rocket that has wings. The wings are fixed wings. It's a composite and steel material. It's what it's made of. And that aft skirt there you see is part of the closeout of that aft nozzle. The Pegasus has a total of 3 stages, first stage, second stage, and third stage. Right there you see they're putting on the avionics structure onto the third stage. That avionics structure holds all of the computers and a tank with gaseous nitrogen, which is used for reaction control, or basically steering that third stage and inserting the spacecraft in the proper orbit. There you see a picture of the first stage, and those items there are the fins. Those fins are installed on the aft end of the first stage. As you see there's a crane operation where they will hoist and install those fins. The fins are used to steer that first stage. Unlike other rockets, this nozzle on the first stage is fixed, so it does not move. So it uses these fins to steer the rocket, kind of like an airplane would steer with its ailerons and its vertical stabilizer. The Pegasus will steer with those fins, and those fins are operated with electromechanical actuators. Interesting fact on the Pegasus is that the first stage, I guess the total weight of the rocket is about 51,000 pounds, and that first stage, once it's ignited, will burn approximately 71 seconds. Second stage will burn about 73 seconds, and then that third stage will burn a total of about 68 seconds. As you see here, this is a transporter that they use to transport the Pegasus rocket out to the what we call the hot pad, or where the L-1011 is waiting for it. It's a tight operation there. The wingspan of the Pegasus is about 22 feet in wingspan from left to right, and that opening of the door is basically just they basically have about a foot on each side of clearance. Here you see the NuStar spacecraft. It's being processed in a white room, and I guess in a clean room. Basically, is a tented area where we maintain cleanliness levels to protect the instruments. They're installing the payload fairing that basically protects the spacecraft during launch and during the captive carry on the L-1011. This fairing is made of composite material. It's basically 2 halves that are pulled together and then bolted and attached to the launch vehicle. It uses basically a separation system that's initiated with some linear shape charge explosives. The transport operation starts very early in the morning at about 5 a.m. They start all the preparations to pull the rocket out of the building 1555. As you see there, they're pulling the rocket out. They maintain a purge in the payload fairing while during the transport operation to make sure that the spacecraft is kept in a clean and dry environment. That morning, when the spacecraft was, when the rocket was pulled out to the hot pad, as you can see, it was a very foggy day, but that it still met the criteria for that operation. So they proceeded with all the mating operation. As you see there, they will be lifting the Pegasus rocket onto the L-1011, or orbital OCA, orbital carrier aircraft. They call it the Stargazer. It uses a system of hooks and umbilicals to connect the rocket to the aircraft. Those umbilicals, we have electrical umbilicals, we have umbilicals to maintain air conditioning inside the payload fairing to maintain the cleanliness of the spacecraft and keep it cool. And the electrical umbilicals provide information on the vehicle health. And there you see the aircraft taking off. This L-1011 is now was there en route to Kwajalein. It did 1 night stopover at Hawaii Air Force Base at Hickam.
Well, Albert, thank you very much for walking through with us what we've taken to get to this point today, getting the Pegasus ready for flight. Thanks very much.
You're welcome. Thanks.
And we're at launch minus 1 hour, 28 minutes, 48 seconds and counting. This is Pegasus Launch Control.
And launch team, this is LC on countdown net. L1011 is rolling for taxi. This completes the engine start and pre-taxi checklist. And we've got wheels up. The launch team will go ahead and check step 116 complete. That completes the pre-takeoff checklist, currently in the climb cruise checklist.
Then batteries on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark. Starboard now. Port now.
LCRSO.
Rudder now. Then sweep now.
LC is go for launch. PLT confirmed.
T-minus 15 seconds. Pilot is go for launch. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Drop. And Pegasus is away. Standing by for ignition. And we have stage 1 ignition. Ignition of the Pegasus rocket with New Star for an understanding of the ultimate destinies of our stars and galaxies.
Fin actuator system operating nominally. Fins following commands and controlling the flight of the vehicle. Power bus is strong. PDU is enabled. Vehicle flight path is nominal, flying the normal trajectory. Stage 1 SEP.
We have stage 1 SEP.
Stage 2 ignition confirmed.
Stage 2 ignition.
Stage 2 separation. 11 seconds to stage 3 ignition. Attitude remains nominal. Stage 3 status good. Stage 3 ignition. Attitude nominal. Stage 3 TVC performing nominally and controlling the flight of the vehicle during the stage 3 burn. Payload separation. New Star separation from Pegasus. New Star reports that the spacecraft has been acquired via TDRS.
And we have confirmation that solar array deployment has been started.
Stand by. The generation of the state vector message is in work and will be transmitted as soon as it's verified.
Joining us now is Tim Dunn. He was our assistant launch director for today's countdown operation. So, Tim, I wonder if you could kind of summarize how the countdown went and then what you've been able to see from the data from your perspective about how the flight of the Pegasus has gone.
Oh, great. Thanks, George. Thanks for having me. It's a terrific day for the Launch Services program here at Kennedy Space Center. We're a little bit spread out right now. Obviously, the core of our launch team is out in the Marshall Islands at Kwajalein, and they are thrilled right now. Back here at Kennedy Space Center, we have a large contingent of our engineering team as well as our management team here at Hangar AE at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, and we're celebrating as well. Really today was a great day for New Star, a great day for Pegasus, great day for the entire launch team, both on the government side as well as the contractor side. So we thank Orbital Sciences for the ride, and we're ready to get into the science portion of the New Star mission. We had a very nominal preparations for launch today. As we were powering up the spacecraft, we saw a indication that we needed to study a little bit. So we spent a little bit of time, delayed our target drop time about a half hour. Albert Sierra was on with you a little bit earlier, explained that. We did the necessary investigation, talked to the vendor, did some drawing research. Our engineering team analyzed the condition, found it acceptable, And we proceeded on with all of the aircraft preparations at Kwajalein on the L-1011, and had wheels up a little bit after 11 a.m. Eastern Time.
The flight itself, what did you see as far as data and coming back from the orbital side of the house, how the flight went?
The flight of the Pegasus, we had a nominal drop right at our target drop time, a little bit after noon Eastern Time. First stage burn was right down the middle of the corridor, very nominal, as well as second and third stage burns. So the performance of the Pegasus launch vehicle was right on the money, George, and we're really thrilled.
Well, we've heard it looks like the orbit is nominal and the solar arrays are out, so it looks like we've got a good launch and a good flight and a good mission that is now underway for the New Star team.
Absolutely.
We've got another Pegasus coming up at the beginning of next year. Can you tell us a little bit about when that launch will be and where that's going from and about that one?
Yeah, our next mission on Pegasus will be the IRIS mission, and that is scheduled on the Western Range for the early part of 2013. So right now we're looking at a launch opportunity in the January or February time frame on the Western Range. We have begun processing the Pegasus for that mission in Building 1555 at Vandenberg Air Force Base, and we're very excited to have another NASA science payload to launch on this great vehicle.
All right, same facility we saw in our video of getting this Pegasus ready to fly. And we've gotten confirmation through the spacecraft team. They've got a good lock on the with the TDRA spacecraft, and the spacecraft is still reorienting, getting ready to point fully into the sun point attitude. But at this point, it seems that we have had a successful launch. So this will conclude our launch coverage for today. At 26 minutes, 17 seconds into the flight of the New Star spacecraft, this is Pegasus Launch Control.
This is Mission Control Houston. Welcome to today's ISS update. It is Thursday, June 14th, 2012. This is a live view inside the International Space Station's Flight Control Room. The Expedition 31 crew is busy on board the orbiting complex today, which is presently about 245 miles above Africa. They were working today on a series of experiments and some maintenance work. Oleg Kononenko, who is the commander of Expedition 31, is beginning the process of packing up the Soyuz. That will soon bring he and Andrei Kuipers and Don Pettit home. He is packing it up full of items that's going to come home with that crew. They are in their final days aboard the International Space Station as they are due to land on Sunday, July 1st at 3:15 a.m. Central Time in the southern landing zone there in Kazakhstan. Of course, we'll have live coverage of all that here on NASA television. Additionally, today, Kononenko has been doing some surface sampling inside the Russian segment. This is basically where they take some swabs of some of the hard surfaces there on the Russian segment of the orbiting complex, just to make sure that everything is neat and tidy and there's no bacteria growing in certain sections. Gennady Padalka, another member of Expedition 31, has been doing some routine maintenance on the Electron system. This is the Russian version of the oxygen generator on board the station. There's also one inside the U.S. segment. Sergei Revin has been transferring oxygen from the Progress vehicle that is currently attached to the International Space Station. That Progress brought up 2.5 tons of supplies to the crew, but it also transfers over fuel and water and air to the space station itself. There you see the Progress 47 docked with the the Pirs docking compartment on the bottom side of the International Space Station. Poisk is up top. That is where the Soyuz 30 or the TMA-04M is currently docked. That is the vehicle that brought up Padalka and Sergei Revin into Akaba. There is the Soyuz 29 or the TMA-03M. That is the vehicle we mentioned earlier that's going to be bringing home Kononenko, Kononenko, Kuipers, and Pettit coming up in a couple of weeks. And then back there at the back is the ATV-3, the European automated transfer vehicle that came up back in March that is currently stocked full of supplies that the crew continues to unload and pack it full of trash. That ATV is going to be burning up in the Earth's atmosphere at the end of the summer. Joe Akaba has been updating software on one of the station's laptop computers. He has also been working on the Glacier experiment. This is an onboard freezer that keeps samples and other items that the crew needs to store at low temperatures. He's also been working on the BASS experiment. This stands for the burning and suppression of solids. The crew has been working on this for the last several days. BASS is an interesting experiment. It takes a look at how flames burn in space. They act a little bit differently up there with no gravity. The accepted approach for putting out fires here on Earth is to aim the extinguisher or the suppressant at the base of the flame, which that is really where the flame is born. It's where it's most stable. It's where air enters the flame, but of course up in space it acts a little bit differently. So this takes a look at that and will be important to future spaceflight in terms of dealing with fires on board. Andre Kuipers has been inspecting the water on-off valves that are in the Columbus laboratory. He is also reviewing procedures for software updates on the Express Rack 4. And there, as the Nile River comes into view, the crew continues to work, including Don Pettit, who's been taking samples from the fluid physics experiment facility. This is inside the Kibo laboratory. That particular rack came up on STS-123 and is one of the core experiment components inside the Japanese laboratory. The crew also has some Earth observation opportunities today, including Argentina, Burundi, as well as Singapore. Of course, if you would like to take a look at any of these images, just log on to the NASA website at www.nasa.gov/station.
Gestern Abend um 22:36 Uhr kannte der Jubel keine Grenzen mehr. Mit seinen 2 Toren hat Mario Gomez Deutschland ja den Sieg gegen den Erzrivalen aus den Niederlanden gebracht und damit ein ganzes Land in schwarz-rot-goldenen Freudentaumel versetzt. Martin Torxel fasst die schönsten Bilder nochmal zusammen.
Ganz Deutschland im kollektiven Freudentaumel, ob auf den Fanmeilen oder in den Kneipen, Feierlaune bundesweit. Bundeskanzlerin auf dem Fest der hessischen Landesvertretung in Berlin kein Halten mehr. Noch kurz vor dem Spiel war Angela Merkel, oberster Fußballfan der Nationalmannschaft, sichtlich angespannt.
Ich fiebere natürlich mit und jetzt muss ich mich konzentrieren.
In Berlin verfolgen mehr als 400.000 Menschen auf der Fanmeile den Sieg über die Oranje.
Gomez, sag ich schon, 2 Tore.
Wir sind alle für Deutschland. Es war ein geiles Spiel und ich meine, sowas kann man nur in Berlin erleben.
Auch in Hamburg feiern mehr als 60.000 Fans auf dem Heiligen Geistfeld bis in die frühen Morgenstunden. Und selbst auf Mallorca am Ballermann grenzenlose Freude in Schwarz-Rot-Gold.
Ich habe gehofft, dass er schon gewinnt und eigentlich auch gewusst, dass er schon gewinnt. Und sie haben es getan.
Lange Gesichter dagegen bei unseren Nachbarn, ganz Holland im Schockzustand, ob im ukrainischen Charkiw oder auch daheim in den Kneipen.
Es ist schade.
Das Spiel, das war sehr schlecht.
Übrigens wurde heute schon orakelt, wie das nächste Spiel der Deutschen gegen Dänemark ausgeht. Elefantendame Nelly hatte wie schon bei den ersten beiden Spielen den richtigen Rüssel und verwandelte klar gegen Dänemark. Es ist also angerichtet für die nächste Jubelparty. Und vielleicht steht uns ein neues Sommermärchen bevor. So schön kann Fußball sein.
An Tagen wie
This is Mission Control Houston. The crew of Expedition 31 has had a very busy week so far on board the orbiting complex. They've had quite a bit of science and other mechanical work on board. There's been dozens of experiments this week, including studying some fundamental physics. The crew took a look at what's called electrostatic interaction between electrically charged particles up in zero gravity. They also took a look at the gas-liquid phase separation that occurs on what's called fine dispersion particles. The crew also worked on one of the facility racks that is inside the Kibo laboratory. It's called the Fluid Physics Experiment Facility. This examines how fluids behave up there in the microgravity environment. That's going to be important for future spacecraft design as well as implications here on Earth. The crew also looked at how jet engine exhaust interacts with the upper reaches of the atmosphere. They also studied quite a bit about how the human body behaves in space. It's one of the main benefits of the space station as we take a look at venturing further on to Mars and to an asteroid one of these days. The crew worked on something called the Integrated Cardiovascular Ambulatory Monitoring Experiment. This is where each of the crew members, depending on who is the subject of the experiment, wears a blood pressure check that happens over the course of 24 hours. They also do something that's very similar to what you find here on Earth, which is an EKG machine. It measures the output of the heart. All of that determines how the crew's cardiovascular system reacts to being up there on board the complex for up to 6 months. The crew also worked with something called the lower body negative pressure device. This is a pair of pants that they put on that basically decreases pressure. It draws blood down from the head. It sort of reenacts what happens to them whenever they land on Earth. And it studies the effects that gravity has on the crew members' bodies after they've been up in space for an extended period of time. The crew also spent some time studying fire up in space. Fire behaves completely differently up in space in the vacuum and the absence of gravity than it does here on the ground. The crew worked on a device called the Combustion Integrated Rack, which tests different fuels and finds out how they combust. And the crew spent a significant amount of time working on something called BAS. This is burning and suppression of solids. This takes a look at how flames burn up in space. It's quite a bit different whenever you put out a fire up in space versus here on Earth. Typically what happens here on the ground, you would aim the fire extinguisher or the suppressant at the base of the flame. This is because that is where the flame is the most stable. It's where the flame is basically born, where the oxygen and the air enters the flame and sort of creates it. But of course up in space you don't have that. So the BAS experiment takes a look at how the fire behaves and how someone would put out that fire up in space. The crew also worked on what's called the amine swing bed. This is a prototype test object for the Orion spacecraft, which is the spacecraft that NASA is building to take us to an asteroid and onto Mars. Size is key whenever it comes to Orion, so all the different environmental systems inside Orion need to be small, compact, and efficient. This amine swing bed is a way to test the carbon dioxide removal assembly that will go on Orion up on board the space station. The space station itself actually has a couple of different systems that scrub out the carbon dioxide, including one in the Destiny laboratory, one in the Tranquility module. Those are fairly large in size. They work very efficiently, but the space station provides an opportunity to test out new equipment and new devices that will go on Orion. And 3 out of the 6 crew members are turning their attention toward their trip home, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. Andrei Kuipers, Oleg Kononenko, and Don Pettit getting ready to wrap up 193 days in space, 191 of those aboard the orbiting complex. They've been getting themselves and their belongings that are coming home, as well as their spacecraft ready for the landing, which is at 3:15 a.m. Central Time on Sunday, July 1st. They've been packing it full of cargo that's going to come home. And the 3 of those also checked out their seat liners. This is the chairs that they sit in whenever they come back home. Those are form-fitted to each one of the crew members. But because the human body gets a little bit taller in space, because gravity's not pulling down on your muscles and bones, they have to check out the seats and get in them to make sure that they still fit. Everything checked out according to plan, and these 3 crew members are getting ready to wrap up their time as part of Expedition 31. So once again, landing scheduled for 3:15 a.m. Central Time, Sunday, July 1st. That'll be at 4:15 a.m. Eastern Time. Of course, we will have live coverage here on NASA television.
This week at NASA.
How you doing? Good to see you.
NASA Administrator Charles Bolden visited the facilities of Space Exploration Technologies following the successful round trip of the company's Dragon spacecraft to the International Space Station. Dragon demonstrated its ability to maneuver en route to the ISS, then make its safe return to Earth. At the SpaceX Rocket Development Facility in McGregor, Texas, Bolden and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk signed documents officially transferring to NASA the cargo returned by Dragon from the orbiting laboratory.
How you doing? Where are you from? We're good.
Bolden, Musk, and others were at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California the next day for a concept baseline review. The CBR, essentially a final draft of specific system designs, is a required milestone of NASA's Commercial Crew Development Program.
You have now allowed NASA to take time to start developing vehicles that are going to get us beyond low Earth orbit, because we don't have to worry about getting people to low Earth orbit anymore. We don't have to worry about getting cargo and people to the International Space Station, because companies like SpaceX are taking on that challenge.
Hi. Langley Research Center recently played host to Mark Sarangelo, head of Sierra Nevada Space Systems. NASA and Sierra Nevada are marking the 5th year of a partnership to design and develop the Dream Chaser space system, an orbital crew vehicle based upon Langley's HL-20 lifting body spacecraft. Sarangelo joined Center Director Lisa Rowe on a tour of Langley's Transonic Dynamics Tunnel. Here, Dream Chaser is being tested to evaluate fluctuations the launch vehicle stack may experience during its ascent to low Earth orbit. A 1,150-second test of the J2X power pack, a subset of the engine, became the longest duration firing ever conducted in the Stennis Space Center's A-Test complex. Surpassing the previous record by more than a full minute, the June 8th test marked a milestone in the development of a next-generation rocket engine designed to carry humans deeper into space than ever before.
The significance of this test is to look specifically at the pumps and what they're producing, to see how they react in different environments. And we're making sure that everything we've put on paper and that we've developed on computer models is working in real life.
The J2X is the first human-rated liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen rocket engine developed in 40 years and will provide upper stage power for NASA's Space Launch System, or SLS, the heavy lift vehicle that'll send the new Orion capsule beyond low Earth orbit. NASA has narrowed the landing target for its most advanced Mars rover, Curiosity. When it sits down on the red planet in August, the car-sized rover will now be closer to Gale Crater's Mount Sharp, where it'll conduct its science. Fear of any additional risk that comes with putting down nearer the mountain's hazardous slope was overcome by confidence in Curiosity's precision landing technology. Rock layers located in the mountain are the prime location for rover research. Launched in November 2011, Curiosity is scheduled to land at approximately 1:31 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on August 6th. Following checkout operations, Curiosity will begin a 2-year study of whether the landing vicinity ever offered an environment favorable for microbial life. In the night skies above Kwajalein Atoll in the Central Pacific Ocean, NASA's Nuclear Spectroscopic Telescope Array, or NuSTAR, was released from the belly of an L-1011 Stargazer aircraft, then sent into space by its Pegasus XL rocket.
3, 2, 1, drop. And Pegasus is away.
In low Earth orbit near the equator, NuSTAR will team with other telescopes already in space, including NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory, to hunt for and provide a more complete picture of the most powerful and exotic objects in space, such as black holes, dead stars, and jets of energy traveling near the speed of light. NuSTAR has more than 10 times the resolution and more than 100 times the sensitivity of its predecessors, operating in a similar range of X-rays.
Okay.
Ja, das
Johnson Space Center, Houston and surrounding communities welcomed a full-scale replica of the Space Shuttle recently with a weekend of activities to commemorate its arrival. The replica, which arrived by barge from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida on June the 1st, was welcomed to its new home by thousands who gathered to watch its arrival and kick off the Shuttlebration weekend. The crowd cheered as the Space Shuttle arrived at the same dock that saw the arrival of the Saturn V rocket in 1977. The shuttle, escorted by a flotilla of boats and a Coast Guard helicopter, was welcomed by a fireboat spray and red, white, and blue confetti salute.
The arrival today of this incredible full-scale replica of the Space Shuttle is a credit to the hard work of this community and to Space Center Houston. It helps secure our legacy for our community and reminds us that we are the explorers. We make the dreams a reality. We're ready for the next great mission.
Early on June 3rd, crowds lined the street of Nassau Bay as the replica made its nearly 4-hour trek down NASA Parkway to its permanent home at Space Center Houston, the official visitor center of the Johnson Space Center. The new attraction will provide visitors a close-up view of a shuttle, including what it's like to be inside the cockpit, an experience that will only be available at Space Center Houston.
60 years ago, on June 18, 1952, H. Julian Allen, a scientist working at the Ames Research Center for the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NASA's predecessor organization, conceived of the design upon which every early U.S. astronaut would rely for his safe return to Earth. Harvey Allen, as he was widely known, later became center director at Ames, but would be best remembered for his blunt body theory of re-entry aerodynamics. Allen's technique was used in NASA's Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo capsules, and will be used on the new Orion capsule as well.
The data relay satellite will work just 1 hour later. Then we will see the video from the spacecraft. We can see the video nearly all the time because so it can cover.
We can keep an eye on the crew and the spacecraft all the time thanks to Tianlian satellite, the data relay satellite.
Yeah.
This is separation of the boosters.
It's the launch tower.
Yeah. They have quite different configuration comparing with the Soyuz launch vehicle.
车前抛，脚前抛整流道，跟风抛整流道，抛整流道。渭南转。长江5号跟踪结束。
The spot is for the.
I have heard from the front that the Yuanwang 5 tracking ship has finished its task.
Once again, this is a rerun of the launch of Shenzhou 9, China's first manned docking mission, carrying 3 astronauts on board. Well, so what's going to happen next to Shenzhou 9? Now it's on its orbit. How many orbits will be maneuvering until he begins to approach?
It will have 5 orbital maneuvers. The first one will happen after 5 orbits. It will enter a nearly circular orbit with the altitude of 330 kilometers.
And this is the Chief Commander of the Manned Space Program, General Chang Wanquan.
Dear Wu Bangguo, Chairman of the NPC Standing Committee, dear leaders, guests, and colleagues, according to report from Beijing Aerobase Command and Control Center, Shenzhou 9 has successfully entered preset orbit, and it's in great condition. Now I announce that Shenzhou 9, the launch of Shenzhou 9 is successfully completed.
For them, it's a major milestone. This one may last up to 2 weeks. You could see a longer mission just to really push the edges of the envelope to show what these spacecraft can do, what the astronauts can do, and how long they can stay up there based on the technology that China has built to date. China plans another manned flight to the space module possibly later this year or in early next year. What China has done in just the last decade has taken a stepping stone approach to human spaceflight. So they went with unmanned launches first, and in 2003 the first manned launch. And what we saw last year was the first unmanned docking at this space module. Now, China is the 3rd country after Russia and the United States to develop human spaceflight, and it really looked at the success of Russia's program, the experience that NASA had to shape its own independent program. They've also just learned from the errors and the successes of those 2 programs. So where you see a long, decades-long legacy of Russia and the United States, China is really relatively new, but they're trying to focus on what they can do successfully and that will be really unique and tailored to what China hopes to accomplish in space.
Shenzhou 9 hob am Mittag vom Raumfahrtbahnhof Jiuquan in der Wüste Gobi ab. An Bord sind noch 2 weitere Besatzungsmitglieder. Der Raketenstart ist der 4. bemannte Raumflug Chinas. Die Volksrepublik will damit erste Schritte zur Entwicklung einer eigenen Raumstation auf den Weg bringen.
1. Ignition. Lifting off.
It's pretty to look at, but in China, it is a glorious sight. The country launching its first space docking mission just minutes ago, with the country's first female astronaut on board. The Shenzhou 9 spaceship is scheduled to spend 10 days in space. China hopes one day to build a space station and land on the moon. Those are some of our top stories, but let's take you back to Oslo, Norway.
Premiere bei Raketenstart. China hat erstmals eine Frau in den Weltraum geschickt. Die ehemalige Pilotin Liu Jian startete an Bord des Raumschiffs Shenzhou 9 ins All. Sie ist Teil einer dreiköpfigen Besatzung, die für knapp 2 Wochen unterwegs sein soll. Dabei sollen Tests zur Entwicklung einer eigenen chinesischen Raumstation durchgeführt werden.
The Shenzhou 9 rocket lifted off from the edge of the Gobi Desert, taking Liu Yang and 2 male colleagues to the Tiangong space module. She only joined China's space program 2 years ago. The team will carry out medical experiments and other tests during the 13-day mission.
Zusammen mit 2 weiteren Astronauten startete die 33-Jährige in der Wüste Gobi mit einem wichtigen Auftrag. Das Raumschiff soll an ein Testmodul für eine chinesische Raumstation andocken. Das Gelingen wäre ein großer Schritt in Chinas Raumfahrtprogramm. Es gilt als Symbol für den Anspruch des Landes auf eine Stellung als Weltmacht.
Die erste Chinesin ins All gestartet. 2 männliche Kollegen hatte sie dabei, als, und jetzt wird es blumig, die Trägerrakete Langer Marsch mit dem Raumschiff Magisches Schiff pünktlich abhob, um dann in 2 Tagen an die Orbitalstation Himmelspalast anzudocken. Dass das tatsächlich ein langer Marsch ins All für die Chinesen war, wird allein daran deutlich, dass die erste Frau ja schon vor genau 49 Jahren dorthin gestartet wurde. Welchen ideologischen Himmelspalast Peking nun mit dieser Mission verbindet, erklärt uns Nicola Albrecht.
Bilder, die die chinesische Regierung gerne der ganzen Welt zeigt. Shenzhou 9, zu Deutsch Himmelsschiff, startet und Pekings Propaganda kann einen Erfolg auf einem Gebiet vermelden, wo das Reich der Mitte den Vorsprung der USA und Russland derzeit mit aller Kraft aufholen will. Für das chinesische Staatsfernsehen pompös inszeniert die Überraschung. Liu Yang, Chinas erste Frau im All. Ich möchte mich für das Vertrauen, das mein Vaterland in mich hat, bedanken. Die Chance, hunderte Millionen chinesischer Frauen im Weltall vertreten zu dürfen, erfüllt mich mit grenzenlosem Stolz. Die Himmelsfee, wie Liu Yang nun in China genannt wird, und ihre beiden männlichen Kollegen haben keine einfache Mission. Gleich mehrere Premieren stehen auf ihrem Programm. In 2 Tagen sollen die Raumfahrer am Weltraummodul Himmelspalast andocken. Dieses Manöver werden die Raumfahrer zum ersten Mal manuell steuern müssen. Keine einfache Aufgabe. Außerdem sollen 2 der Taikonauten, wie Raumfahrer in China heißen, erstmals in das Weltraummodul umsteigen und 10 Tage lang testen, ob sie sich problemlos dort aufhalten können. Damit hat China zwar noch lange nicht das Raumfahrtniveau der Supermächte im All erreicht, doch auch im Reich der Mitte weiß man, erfolgreiche Raumfahrt gilt als Machtbeweis. Pekings Ziel schon deswegen eine eigene große Raumstation im Jahr 2020.
Schön, warum auch Susanne Wieseler benetzt wurde vom Wasser heute. Die Wolken zogen immer diagonal von Südwest nach Nordost, präzise über Nordrhein-Westfalen drüber. Und man sieht es dann auch an den Daten, die wir mal rausgesucht haben. Die Temperaturen gedämpft und es gab dann auch einiges an Regen. In Emstetten nicht so viel, 21,7 Grad, 4 Liter auf den Quadratmeter von 0 Uhr bis jetzt aufsummiert. 15 Liter waren es in Siegen und dort dann auch gleich nur 16 Grad. Und im Süden Deutschlands sah das ganz anders aus. Sonthofen zum Beispiel 32,2 Grad. Aber wenn wir dann mal auf die nächsten Tage schauen und auch auf die heutige Situation, da wird sich nämlich prinzipiell nicht allzu viel dran ändern, dann sieht man immer, der tiefe Luftdruck befindet sich hier zwischen Island und den britischen Inseln und das bedeutet dann immer, dass wir hier eher das wechselhafte kühle Wetter haben und die Höhenströmung verläuft dann hier an der Ostsee vorbei, an diesem Hoch etwa über dem Schwarzen Meer vorbei. In diese Richtung ist es sonniger und auch wärmer und insofern ist der Südosten Deutschlands immer ein bisschen besser dran als der Nordwesten. Wo ist Nordrhein-Westfalen? Im Nordwesten. Und jetzt gucken wir mal auf den weiteren Verlauf. Hier in der kommenden Nacht immer noch Regengüsse, aber morgen ist der Westen und der Nordwesten etwas besser dran. Nordrhein-Westfalen natürlich eher zu finden im Westen als im Nordwesten, das gebe ich ja zu, aber trotzdem, wir sind in diesem Einflussbereich. Morgen gibt es aber etwas freundlicheres Wetter. In der kommenden Nacht, also noch Montag, erst schwül und heiß, dann allerdings von Westen nachmittags örtlich unwetterartige Gewitter. Da werden wir uns dann natürlich drum kümmern am Montag und auch der Dienstag. Das ist dann wieder ein ruhigerer Tag bei 23, 24 Grad. Hier nochmal flott der 15-Tage-Trend für Dortmund. Der morgige Tag schriftlich. Zurück zu dir, Susanne.
Die erste Chinesin ins All gestartet. 2 männliche Kollegen hatte sie dabei, als, und jetzt wird es blumig, die Trägerrakete Langer Marsch mit dem Raumschiff Magisches Schiff pünktlich abhob, um dann in 2 Tagen an die Orbitalstation Himmelspalast anzudocken. Dass das tatsächlich ein langer Marsch ins All für die Chinesen war, wird allein daran deutlich, dass die erste Frau ja schon vor genau 49 Jahren dorthin gestartet wurde. Welchen ideologischen Himmelspalast Peking nun mit dieser Mission verbindet, erklärt uns Nicola Albrecht.
Bilder, die die chinesische Regierung gerne der ganzen Welt zeigt. Shenzhou 9, zu Deutsch Himmelsschiff, startet und Pekings Propaganda kann einen Erfolg auf einem Gebiet vermelden, wo das Reich der Mitte den Vorsprung der USA und Russland derzeit mit aller Kraft aufholen will. Für das chinesische Staatsfernsehen pompös inszeniert die Überraschung. Liu Yang, Chinas erste Frau im All. Ich möchte mich für das Vertrauen, das mein Vaterland in mich hat, bedanken. Die Chance, hunderte Millionen chinesischer Frauen im Weltall vertreten zu dürfen, erfüllt mich mit grenzenlosem Stolz. Die Himmelsfee, wie Liu Yang nun in China genannt wird, und ihre beiden männlichen Kollegen haben keine einfache Mission. Gleich mehrere Premieren stehen auf ihrem Programm. In 2 Tagen sollen die Raumfahrer am Weltraummodul Himmelspalast andocken. Dieses Manöver werden die Raumfahrer zum ersten Mal manuell steuern müssen. Keine einfache Aufgabe. Außerdem sollen 2 der Taikonauten, wie Raumfahrer in China heißen, erstmals in das Weltraummodul umsteigen und 10 Tage lang testen, ob sie sich problemlos dort aufhalten können. Damit hat China zwar noch lange nicht das Raumfahrtniveau der Supermächte im All erreicht, doch auch im Reich der Mitte weiß man, erfolgreiche Raumfahrt gilt als Machtbeweis. Pekings Ziel schon deswegen eine eigene große Raumstation im Jahr 2020.
In knapp 2 Stunden ist es soweit. Dann wird das Spiel Deutschland gegen Dänemark in Lviv angepfiffen. Bei den deutschen Fans steigt die Vorfreude und die Spannung vor dem wichtigen letzten Gruppenspiel der EM. Rund 13.000 deutsche Fans sind in Lviv in der Ukraine. Millionen werden in Deutschland mit der Mannschaft mitfiebern. Auf den Fanmeilen, in Kneipen oder zu Hause. Romy Hiller und Carlo Schlender mit den Vorbereitungen zum großen Spiel.
Es ist angerichtet, der Grill ist heiß, das Bier kalt und selbst in dieser Kölner Kneipe, wo man normalerweise nie Fußball schaut, wird heute jeder zum EM-Experten.
Ein klares 2-0. Das hat Podolski gemacht in seinem 100. Spiel, mal ein wunderschönes Tor.
Zugegeben, auch unsere nördlichen Nachbarn bemühen sich zumindest um das richtige EM-Fieber. Aber was ist schon dänische
Gemütlichkeit
gegen deutsche Ekstase? Genauso wie beim Spiel gegen Holland sollen die Fanfeste in Hamburg und Berlin auch heute wieder zu Plätzen der Glückseligkeit werden.
Eine junge, gute, starke Mannschaft muss funktionieren.
Grenzenloser Optimismus auch im ukrainischen Lviv, wo deutsche Fans schon seit den frühen Nachmittagsstunden auf das kommende Spiel anstoßen.
Das Schöne hier in Lviv ist, dass nicht nur die deutschen und die dänischen Fans vor dem Spiel hier miteinander gemeinsam friedlich feiern, sondern dass offensichtlich auch fast jeder Einwohner, hat man das Gefühl, von Lviv hier in die Innenstadt gekommen ist, um gemeinsam mit den Fans dieses EM-Feeling zu genießen.
Aber zurück nach Dänemark. Was macht man hier eigentlich heute Abend nach dem Spiel?
What will you do on Sunday night after you lose?
After we win?
After you lose?
After we won the game? Yeah.
After you lose?
Will not happen.
Tatsächlich haben die Dänen, genau wie wir, Holland besiegt. Und so herrscht in der deutsch-dänischen Familie Hoffmann Uneinigkeit über die fußballerischen Qualitäten beider Nationen.
Ganz klar für Deutschland, die spielen den besseren Fußball, attraktiv, schnell. Dänemark der Fußball ist ein bisschen langweilig, finde ich. Meine Frau sieht das anders.
Die sind ein Team und die kämpfen bis zum letzten Mann. Und das, finde ich, machen die sehr gut.
Trotzdem, es wird ihnen nichts nützen. Da sind sich die deutschen Fans hierzulande, in Lviv und selbst auf Mallorca einig. Heute Abend starten wir in ein neues Kapitel des schwarz-rot-goldenen Sommermärchens.
Ja, und auf Deutschlands größter Fanmeile in Berlin zwischen Siegessäule und Brandenburger Tor werden heute Abend Hunderttausende Fans erwartet. Doro Steitz ist für uns dort. Doro, füllt es sich denn schon langsam?
Ja,
450.000 werden erwartet. Und wenn man sich hier mal umsieht, wir können das mit der Kamera mal kurz zeigen, es sind auch wirklich schon richtig viele da. Die ersten sind schon heute Mittag gekommen um 13 Uhr und die feiern hier eben jetzt schon Schwarz-Rot-Gold. 8 Stunden werden das dann bis zum Abpfiff sein oder 10. Da ist eben die Stimmung jetzt auch schon nach Party. Alle Fans hoffen hier natürlich auf einen Sieg gegen Dänemark, denn man möchte schließlich auf der Fanmeile auch das Viertelfinale sehen, am besten auch noch das Halbfinale und das Finale gleich dazu.
Ja, vielen Dank, Doro. Und wir drücken natürlich doll die Daumen für heute Abend, Andreas, und bleiben beim Thema.
Genau, es kribbelt schon so langsam. Ja, wir stimmen uns schon ein. Ja, vom Gefühl her hat Deutschland das Viertelfinalticket schon gelöst. Aber Vorsicht, um ganz sicher zu gehen, braucht unsere Nationalmannschaft heute Abend im letzten Gruppenspiel gegen Dänemark mindestens ein Unentschieden, um Gruppensieger zu werden. Eine Warnung sollte die Zahl sein. Seit nun schon 16 Jahren wartet die DFB 11 auf einen Sieg gegen die Dänen. Und wir schalten mal rüber nach Lviv in die Ukraine zu unserem EM-Reporter Klaus Jakob. Klaus, die offizielle Aufstellung kommt erst in einer halben Stunde raus, aber Sie sind ja ganz nah dran. Haben Sie denn Neuigkeiten? Wer spielt?
Ja, am liebsten wollen alle spielen, Andreas. Jeder fühlt sich hier reif für die Stammelf, aber es dürfen ja nur 11 ran. Der Bundestrainer hat sich entschieden. Er vertraut also auf die Mannschaft, die gegen Holland aufgelaufen ist. Mit einigen Ausnahmen auf der rechten Abwehrseite bringt er für den gesperrten Boateng Lars Bender, der Leverkusen, hat gestern im Abschlusstraining überzeugt, den Bundestrainer auch in den letzten Wochen. Der Junge ist nah dran, der wird's richten. Und das Mittelfeld bleibt auch das Gleiche. Das heißt, Lukas Podolski bestreitet heute sein 100. Länderspiel für Deutschland. Ich sag mal, Riesenkompliment an den Kölner. Wir hoffen, dass heute mal der Knoten platzt und dass er seinen linken Hammer rausholt. Es fehlt also nur noch ein Pünktchen und dann haben wir es geschafft.
Ja, vielen Dank, Klaus, und euch dann ein schönes, erfolgreiches Spiel.
Wenn Luxusschlittenfahrer und Pedalritter im Einheitsdress im Stau stehen und Silvesterraketen mitten im Sommer den Nachthimmel erleuchten, dann ist klar, im deutschen Fußball hat sich mal wieder Großes getan. Und so feierten auch in der vergangenen Nacht wieder Tausende in den Straßen. Gute Laune, weit und breit.
Ich wusste, dass wir gewinnen, deshalb musste ich nicht so lange hingucken. Ja, und wir haben gewonnen. Und das ist gut so.
Neben all der Partystimmung, es gab natürlich auch Menschen, die am gestrigen Tag ihren Dienst verrichten mussten. Das Siegtor in der 80. Minute verpasste jedoch kaum jemand. Und so gab es zu später Stunde auch noch manchen Fachkommentar.
Isel hat mich ein bisschen enttäuscht, aber Gomez ist unser Mann. Wenn nicht, ist Klose unser Mann. Und Deutschland gewinnt die EM und alle wissen das.
Am kommenden Freitag geht es für die deutsche Elf nun gegen Griechenland. Und nach der Partynacht gestern beginnen am Morgen schon die Planungen für die nächste große Fußball-Open-Air-Fanfeier.
Die Fans meinen also schon, wir werden Europameister. Moritz, wie sieht man das so im Netz? Du hast mal nachgeguckt, was für die Reaktionen es gibt im Netz?
Die Stimmungen sind recht ähnlich. Also die Menschen in Deutschland sind begeistert von dieser Mannschaft und von diesem Spiel, das diese Mannschaft hinlegt. Und deswegen war gestern auch klar, dass ganz Deutschland dieses Spiel geguckt hat. Hier sehen wir eine Aufnahme von der A1. Da ist nichts los und das ist wirklich ungewöhnlich für einen Sonntagabend. Ja, hier ein kleiner Blick hinter die Kulissen. Die deutsche Mannschaft auf dem Flug nach Hause nach dem Spiel. Ja, und so äußern sich die Menschen nach dem Spiel. Bum, bum, Bender, wir sind im EM-Finale, heißt es im Netz. Und so sehen die Bilder aus, die im Netz verbreitet werden. Alle Menschen kleiden sich ein in Trikots, in Schwarz-Rot-Gold, nicht nur sich selber, ihre Hunde, sondern auch ihre Häuser und ihre Kinder. Deutschland trifft jetzt also auf Griechenland. Irgendwie Ironie des Schicksals, wenn man jetzt mal politisch an diese Konstellation Deutschland-Griechenland herangeht. Hier schreibt ein User beispielsweise, jetzt geben wir den Griechen die nächste Euro-Krise. Der Rettungsschirm gegen unser Team muss erst noch erfunden werden, meint er. Also da ist schon mit ganz viel Ironie der Kollege an der Sache. Hier haben wir eine Karikatur, ein griechischer Fußballspieler im Deutschland-Trikot und er sagt, hi, ich bin Grieche, nicht Deutscher, aber Deutschland steht drauf, weil die sponsern uns ja. Also, Viel Spaß wird es geben, sicher in diese Richtung noch vor diesem Spiel Deutschland-Griechenland. Diskutieren Sie mit uns, was denken Sie vom Viertelfinale unter facebook.com/Netzreporter.
Pictures of Hong Kong outside our studios here, and in Hong Kong, a T1 typhoon warning signal has been raised. Again, there's a live pictures of Victoria Harbour. Not quite seeing the storm coming in just yet, but some cloudy skies up over IFC building. Now, the Typhoon 1 signal is up because of a nearby tropical storm. And Mari Ramos joins us now with more from the CNN World Weather Center. Mari.
Hey, Christy, yeah, you know, it doesn't look too bad out there in Hong Kong. A little bit of cloud cover. You might get some rain, but the storm is far away enough that what you're getting is the subsidence from the storm. In other words, that sinking air, so not a lot of rain is expected. And actually, when the storms get this close to Hong Kong, but not close enough to bring you rain, what you end up with is sometimes you get some pretty bad air quality. So that's going to be something to monitor over the next day or so. This is a storm right here. It is Talim. It is the one that caused you all that rain, or the same system, I should say, that caused you all that rain over the weekend, especially Saturday there over Hong Kong. Winds right now with the center of the storm are close to 80 kilometers per hour, gusting to about 100. And you can see the circulation right here in the South China Sea. Hainan will probably get some rain from this, also parts of Vietnam. And you can even see a little bit of that flow affecting Luzon here. So they're definitely already a weather maker when it comes to Tropical Storm Talim. We're not expecting this to become a typhoon, but I don't think that's going to matter too much in this case, because the main problem with Talim will be the amount of rain that we're expecting, particularly along the path. The center of the storm will stay over the water, we think, but close enough to land that across eastern China here and possibly over Taiwan, the rain could be significant enough to cause flooding, maybe even mudslides. So we need to be extra careful when it comes to the storm, even though it is only, and I hate saying only, a tropical storm. It is quite the weather maker, we think, over the next few days. As far as rainfall, well, we could be seeing in some cases 8, 15, maybe isolated areas of 25 centimeters of rain along the coast of China here and eventually into parts of Taiwan. So we'll monitor that and also watch out for that outflow there also for the Philippines. Now, before we get to our other storm, the typhoon that is moving across southern parts of Japan, I do want to just stay in China for just a moment because we've had some serious flooding again, this time in the northeast. I want to show you a few of the pictures that we have from this area. This is from the flooding, you know, when I tell you how dangerous it is for people to try to drive through flooded roads. Not only does it mess up your car, like you see here, but you can end up, you could kill yourself because you don't know what's in the water. You don't know if the road is even down there anymore because you can't see it, so it does become extremely dangerous. Not only the cities had problems, there were problems in the outskirts. The next piece of video shows us the problems with the flooding in the agricultural areas, and that right there, that's hail, and that's another sign of a serious and severe storm, and that is disastrous for plants and crops there. Come back over to the weather map over here very quickly. This is the typhoon I was telling you about, this one affecting parts of Japan. We're expecting Gushol to have pass fairly close, winds already close to 200 kilometers per hour, and it is expected to continue tracking northward here and possibly have a direct impact on Japan as we head through the next day or so. Let's go ahead and check out your forecast. Chrissy, this next piece of video is really something else. Get ready. This is from Minnesota. Just yesterday, you can see this huge storm that was forming. It almost looks like a mothership cloud, sometimes it's called. You can see it right there. The storm itself was a severe storm that formed. You can see not only the wall cloud there, but you can also see bits of the funnel that begins to form as this moves through the, oh, there's the funnel, definitely. You can hear the winds, you can see the lightning in the background. Really amazing footage. I know those storm chaser wannabes out there are just drooling over these images right here. Extremely dangerous conditions. There were no reports, fortunately, of serious injuries, though. Back to you.
And it was a very dangerous, yes, a very dangerous situation. But they were able to disable the thruster and correct the situation.
This is the Shenzhou 9 camera taking image of Tiangong 1. And now it's the other way around. The Tiangong 1 camera taking of Shenzhou 9 spacecraft. We can see from the two camera images that they're getting very close now.
Yes.
As Mr. Zhang said, there is some dangerous happening in the docking process, but the big difference from the last mission, we have 3 astronauts on board. If any unexpected thing happens, they can take over the control of the docking.
The astronauts can practice override and do it manually if anything wrong with the automatic procedure.
That's the beauty of having 2 alternative methods of docking.
Well, it seems they're about to dock.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, they have already docked. Tiangong 1 and Shenzhou 9, they have docked. Obviously, the astronauts should have felt the bump. But that says it has formed a combination, and the 2 spacecraft are joined in space.
The capture ring has already attached, but they need other procedures, such as forced alignment and also pulling the rings together and pulling them tightly. There are 12 hooks on both sides of the vehicle, and each can provide a pulling forces of about 3 tons. So the 12 pair of hooks can provide a pulling force of about 36 tons. It is big enough to seal the 2 vehicles very tightly.
What the astronauts are about to do right now, are they about to check the seal and electronic connection between the 2 vehicles?
This will monitor everything.
Yes, they will check the connection is firmly, and also will check the air pressure is okay, and other things.
And normally, how long does it take for the astronauts to get into the other module, that's the space lab?
Well, the docking itself has not been finished. As I have mentioned, if there is a forced alignment, it will take about 10 more minutes. If there is no forced alignment, I mean the attitude is accurate enough, it will take about 7 minutes, like the last time in Shenzhou 8 mission.
I presume this must have been done on the ground for hundreds of times.
Yeah.
So how different is it when it is done in...
As Ms. Zhang Qianling has said, the orbital module of Shenzhou 9 spaceship can be recognized as the kitchen, dining room, and the toilet of the whole mission. And the Tiangong 1 target vehicle can be called the workshop, and also the bedroom of them. And at any moment, there will be 1 astronaut remain in the Shenzhou 9 spaceship.
All right, now we have the live feed from the combination of Shenzhou 9 and Tiangong 1. They're still doing some pressurizing work. The joining part between Shenzhou and Tiangong, when they are 100% that the pressure is level between the 2 vehicles, they will open the hatch.
Now you can see the internal channel has opened.
This is Commander Jing Haipeng. He's still doing work in the re-entry capsule of Shenzhou 9. On the other end, where we see an opening, that should be the hatch of Tiangong.
Yeah, of course. And this is the inner side of the Tiangong 1 target vehicle.
So far, it is still empty, without human, but very soon they will be occupied by the astronauts from the other side.
This is the historical moment.
This space looks have a larger volume than Shenzhou 9.
Almost double the space of the Shenzhou spaceship.
And of course, this space hasn't been visited by human for 9 months.
You can see the huge Chinese tie.
And also a Chinese flag on the wall.
And also between them are the central control computer of the Space Lab.
And we have a regular check of all the
subsystems
on board. We're still waiting for the moment when Commander Jing Haipeng opened that hatch we see in the middle of the picture and entered Tiangong 1. They're trying to read the balance of pressure between the two canisters.
You can see there are many video cameras installed in the volume of Tiangong 1 target vehicle.
因为对于通道相对来说要比较狭窄一点，因为它在里面操作呢，要对摄像机有一些遮挡。
Very narrow, so they've been doing a lot of work. Right now we've seen Liu Yang staying solely in the orbital module. And she will be doing a lot of work of observation of whether the spacecraft have been working normally. 听不清楚。According to.
对，是这样。
这个时候我们再看到飞控大厅里面的所有的这个位置又都坐满了人。我们现在的经验就是，只要每一个位置上坐满了人，就是对于整个的我们的飞行当中最重要的节点。
And that means the most important moment of the whole mission.
This is a very important moment, so Ms. Liu Yang should monitor the status of the Shenzhou spaceship.
She will keep it on her seat inside the re-entry module all the time.
Not very necessary.
No, she will also enter Tiangong 1 later on. After Jing Haipeng and Liu Wang enter Tiangong space module. Now she's keeping a close watch. Well, it should be that the hatch will be opened. I was told there was a key that is that is in the middle of the hatch. They have to open with a key and turn the key to open that hatch.
曙光到，请通知航天员切换空气插座。曙光明白。
We should also emphasize that the
hatch has been opened. The hatch has been opened to China's first prototype of Space Lab Tiangong 1, and astronaut is waving his hand to the camera, of course, but that means he will get into Tiangong 1, the space module that has been flying there for 9 months. And it looks like he's in good shape, and there are a lot of handles on the wall. He's basically floating around and have some fun.
Yeah. Quite interesting.
Because before that, we have never seen a Chinese restaurant maneuvering in such a big place. And also, astronaut Liu Wang is flying into this space, and they're checking. This should be a familiar environment. They've been there on the ground, but it's just 9 months in between.
We should say that the ground simulation is efficient and effective for them, for their training.
And now they will probably turn on all the powers and check all the parameters. And
the voltage of the two vehicles are quite different. The voltage of the Tiangong 1 target vehicle is about 100 volts, while the voltage of the Shenzhou 9 spaceship.
You mean they have two different power systems?
Yeah.
Why is that? Why don't they have the same identical power system so that they can?
There are many reasons, historical reasons and technical issues. And the total output of Tiangong 1 target vehicle is about 3,500 watts. This is even larger than the first generation of space stations before.
I don't know whether you can tell where is the sleeping quarter, where is the working area.
Well, there are two sleeping bags, the green one.
On the left.
Yeah.
indicator of the atmosphere inside Tiangong-1 before our astronaut entered.
What is the optimal temperature inside the cabin of Tiangong-1?
23.
23 degrees Celsius.
Yeah.
So it should be a comfortable environment.
We should emphasize that there is no up and down concept now.
Many people are saying that when astronauts get into space, they may run into motion sickness because of loss of orientation. They don't seem to have motion sickness. When did motion sickness occur? John?
Well, if it's going to occur at all, it usually occurs in the first day in space. But remember that anyone who is a trained astronaut has been through a wide variety of tests to determine whether they're unusually susceptible to motion sickness.
But you cannot tell 100% on the ground.
You cannot tell 100%, that's correct.
They have been used to it during their flight in Shenzhou 9 spaceship.
And there are a lot of handles on the wall. It seems the astronauts are using them to hold on to it.
Of course. It is very necessary because they will in a floating status in a zero-G condition. This is a report of Liu Yang.
Just now, astronaut Liu Yang stayed behind, reported on the status of their mission. Well, they put on some earpiece.
They are checking the communication systems.
The communication with the ground or with the ground.
Because Shenzhou 9 will be shut down during their activities in Tiangong-1 target vehicle.
Well, the power is on.
They open the central control computer. They should check everything.
Once again, let me explain what is going on here. On the right-hand side is Liu Yang staying in Shenzhou 9's re-entry capsule. On the left is Jing Haipeng working on the main computer on board Tiangong-1 Space Lab.
19号到，请动3通知动2关闭综合显示单元手控开关。19号明白。
They will shut down the integrated monitoring system.
Will be entering into the Tiangong-1.
Okay, astronaut Liu Yang is also about to leave her seat on Shenzhou, or is she going to perform some obviously, she just shut down the central integrated
monitoring unit.
It's not the same as they do in the International Space Station. I saw the astronauts there, and they just fly.
That's a result of being in space for
a
enough
long time.
You know, they develop
They are
confidence.
accustomed to that.
They quickly learn how to aim themselves and
because
fly without touching
it's kind of
anything.
tricky to use the force in space. When you have an action, you have a reaction. Sometimes you cannot predict how strong that can be.
It is, and if you make any sudden movement, it may cause unforeseen consequences.
So to get yourself familiarized with the environment, you maybe could use some handles to try to get comfortable with this environment first.
These are like the training wheels on a child's bicycle.
The training wheels on the child's bike. And of course, this is easier to hold on to something when you are performing a task.
Sure. On the International Space Station, wherever there is a working location, there are foot restraints. So you can anchor yourself there without having to use a hand to hold yourself in place while you're working with the equipment.
This is quite important.
But we cannot tell which is up, which is down,
and which
here.
Is up. Yes.
And there is no up and down.
They found that for psychological reasons, it's nice to have people
the floor
agree.
and seating, because
yes.
we can paint it or arrange it in that way so that you can feel comfortable as a human being. There's still floor and seating.
You can see here that the floor is set up so that people can step from one restraint to another. And people are less likely to become disoriented when they have some kind of a framework built into their environment.
神舟9号，我是北京。
神舟9号到。
请通知栋梁，在天宫1号实验舱内佩戴通信头带，向地面报告情况。
They asked Mr. Liu Wang to report his status to the ground.
神舟9号报告。
And currently they're doing a lot of checkups of all the systems before they can settle down to their work.
This will be a routine check for them who have been trained many times on the ground.
栋梁正在装气体采样装置。北京明白。
Liu Wang is installing the gas sampling system.
The gas sampling of the inside atmosphere.
神舟9号到。
神舟9号到。神舟9号通报天宫1号工况及身体情况。神舟9号明白。目标工作正常。
The target vehicle is normal.
Shenzhou 9's power has been shut?
Not now.
神舟9号状态良好。北京明白。
But the attitude control of the whole combination will be in charge by Tiangong 1.
But do they have still to do attitude control?
Of course, the movements of astronauts inside the vehicle will be a disturbance to the whole combination.
You mean the movement of the astronaut will change the attitude of this combination?
Because the angular momentum of the whole vehicle is a constant.
Also, atmospheric drag on the solar cell arrays constantly disturbs the orientation of the spacecraft.
Even if there's very little.
Even if there's very little, it's a small force acting for a very long time.
Sometimes they still have to do the repositioning.
Yes.
But the advantage of Tiangong 1 target vehicle is that it uses control moment gyroscopes. It only uses electricity, so the propellants can be saved.
Well, obviously Liu Yang has also left her seat on Shenzhou 9. And she is about to enter Tiangong 1 too.
Yeah.
That's a Chinese first woman astronaut.
申请发送配141轨道舱摄像机通道2指令。
Is on the other side of the hatch tunnel.
Ms. Liu Yang is asking the ground to switch the video camera.
And thanks to China's first data relay satellite, we can witness all these
yes,
consecutively
On the upper right of this screen is the source of the date we required. Now it is required by Tianlian data relay satellite.
A lot of bags of packages.
Maybe one is full.
They're full of mooncakes.
Yeah, this is full and.
It's no good for health. I was told there was toilet and even separate toilets on board on Tianwen 1.
And we specially made urine collectors for the female astronaut. It is quite different from that of the male astronaut.
And that's very considerate.
Yeah.
It is very necessary.
But how can they sleep in such an environment? Are they have bed or?
No, they will have
just
sleeping bags.
Bunkers. Sleeping bags.
Yeah.
Sleeping bags. They will sleep inside Tiangong 1.
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
There is a story that the first female cosmonauts in space station is Miss Savitskaya. The ground asked the Savitskaya to sleep in the Soyuz vehicle, while she decided to sleep with her male crews together in the space station. But there will always be one astronaut on duty when the others are sleeping.
So we need to have at least one astronaut on duty.
One is on duty and
to take charge of the whole spacecraft.
Yeah, one is on duty and the other two is sleeping.
There must be one on duty all the time.
Yeah.
Monitoring the critical status and parameters of the combination.
But when they are in orbit, do they have to make any moves to make sure that the flight is okay?
What do you mean of the moves?
I mean, do they have to touch any buttons, or change the status of the engine, or anything, or just let the spacecraft fly in automatic mode?
Of course, they have this kind of task to touch the buttons or change the status of some certain parameters, because the environmental control and the life support system, or ECLSS, is a very important and complex system. It has many subsystems. All the status of these subsystems should be monitored.
Well, there is a new development there. Obviously marking the success of the mission, that is the rendezvous and docking, and also the astronauts has already entered the space flag.
After 6 days of stationary in this space laboratory, they will perform the manual docking.
That means Shenzhou 9 will undock with Tiangong 1 and distance itself, then try to get close again and join Tiangong 1 once again in a manual mode.
Yeah.
It seems they are filming something that is to the left. But basically, this is the environment that they will be living in for quite some time, at least 10 days. So their sleep patterns are quite different from what is on on the ground because they don't have
Gravity.
nights and daylights
Yes.
as we do.
Yes.
So can they sleep in the light as they have at least?
Well, they are in the cabin. Although there will be nearly 15 sunrise and sunset during one day, but they will not be influenced by this.
Because the change of light normally affected our sleep patterns.
They have the option of controlling the intensity of the lighting in that module, so they can.
And we use semiconductor illumination system on our Tiangong-1 target vehicle. This is more effective and more safe for our spacecraft than before.
Do they have windows?
There are windows on Shenzhou 9, but I guess not.
There are windows on the hatch.
There's only window on the hatch, but
Yeah.
there is no window on the body of the spacecraft, so that they cannot see the outside.
When I go into space, I want to have a window.
Yeah, because the International Space Station, there's a cupola.
Cupola,
where
cupola.
They can watch the space and the Earth. That should be an exhilarating
It's very
experience.
habit-forming.
And every astronaut wants to go there and stay there.
Cupola has seven or eight windows. The cupola module is installed on the Tranquility node module of the International Space Station.
That gives you an ideal place to enjoy
their view.
The vintage position of being in space.
But this...
Right, we have seen astronaut Liu Yang, China's first woman astronaut, get into the space lab. All the crew members, 3 of them, are in Tiangong now. It's a pretty big space, accommodating 3 astronauts, and they still have a lot of room. And it's the first time for Liu Yang to manage to have some walk in the weightless environment. So it seems she's doing well.
Yeah. It is said that there will be curtains to keep their privacy.
When they're sleeping.
Yeah. And also there are secret communication rooms in the Beijing Flight Control Center.
They can talk to their family members in private.
And talk to the doctors privately. And it is very interesting that this time they will have a two-way or bi-directional communication with the ground. So they can see the pictures and videos of their family members.
But this is very important.
Very important.
When they can see their families and their children and parents, it's definitely a reassuring and warming experience.
Yeah.
Well, this is the in-cabin view of Tiangong-1. All the 3 astronauts have already come on board.
请神舟9号乘组左转，面对天空轨道舱内摄像机镜头，挥手致意。
The ground staff is asking for a photo op.
请注意，3名航天员均左转对准镜头，挥手致意。
Of course, it's the first time they've been together facing us. The audience is here on the ground. They have a look at how they've been doing. It's for publicity purposes, but it's very important to hear them working together, waving their hands at us.
Now Liu Yang is floating.
340 kilometers above us. Well, they still try to manage to keep the balance. But it's a learning curve.
Just watch how they act a week from now. You'll see a lot of proficiency.
Improvement.
Yes.
Because a week of experience will make them much better when they're doing this.
And there will be better photo ops in the future.
I hope so. But this is floating. She just have less than 50 minutes of drill and exercise. Maybe she will do a much better job when she gets weeks later.
The body still has a reflex that thinks it's falling, and it takes a while for you to become accustomed to the sensation and override that reflex.
I was told that there is a contradiction of what your eyes are telling you and what your vestibular system is telling you. That's why it sometimes have troubles moving around.
That is what is disturbing to a person, getting contradictory signals.
Because it's something that you cannot run into on the ground. It's only there that you have this kind of contradiction.
This is called the vestibular problems met by the astronauts. And also, to overcome the redistribution of blood, we have penguin suits on board.
You mentioned penguin suits. I'm always interested in that. Why do you call that penguin suit, and what's it for?
Well, this suit can provide a negative pressure for their legs and foot. So the blood can be redistributed normally, like the ground.
But why only the legs and the feet?
Because
why pressure only applied to the lower part of the body?
A negative pressure.
Negative pressure. It's suction.
Negative pressure.
It pulls blood back into the lower extremities, where the blood would normally pool when you're standing upright.
So because of the blood coming to the top of the body.
Right.
And is it proving it's working well, what you call penguin suit?
We should check it. And this is the important experiment on board Tiangong-1.
You mean the suit itself?
Yes.
They're still doing their routine checks. They haven't had time to play with anything yet. But
yes.
I hope they will have more fun pictures taken from the space lab when they're finished doing their work.
Thanks to Tianlian-1 data relay satellite constellation, we have a coverage of about 77. So we can see a so long time videos of the combination.
But it could be a stress for the astronauts, always being watched and monitored by people on the ground. Every move I make, everything that I see will be viewed and analyzed by the people on the ground.
It's very much like being on stage 24 hours a day.
Yes. Your life is just being backed.
Yeah. There he goes, up onto the ceiling.
They will arrange their daily life according to the Beijing time.
And do you happen to know how many hours do they work every day, and how many hours do they rest, and how many personal time do they have?
They have 7 hours for sleeping every day, and about 3 to 5, 2 hours, maybe 2 hours for their private time. And also, as I mentioned, they have a notebook PC on board for amusement, entertainment. We can enjoy the view of our beautiful Earth by the window of Shenzhou spaceship.
They have to get back to Shenzhou to
yes.
have a view of the Earth.
Yeah.
That's in the re-entry capsule, or that's in the orbital module.
Both, I guess. I can be sure that there are windows on the re-entry capsule, but I don't sure if there is two on the orbital module.
They should have put more windows there. Definitely.
In your future.
And it will be worst experience, especially for the astronauts.
As you said, cupola is a favorite of every astronaut.
China has completed its first manned docking in space. It was an automatic maneuver, but still an important milestone. The Xinhua news agency reports that the crew of the Shenzhou 9, or the Divine Vessel spacecraft, has entered the Tiangong-1 module, or the Heavenly Palace. Now, this is a crucial step toward creating the country's first space station, which China hopes to put in orbit around year 2020. Now, China's progress comes as the U.S. scales back its manned space program because of budget cuts and shifting priorities. And on board is China's first woman to travel into space, Liu Yang, and her presence on the mission has been praised as a breakthrough for women in the field. But despite excelling as a fighter pilot and now taikonaut, or space traveler, some reports have suggested that's not always enough. For example, Reuters quotes the China Daily, which says, in order to qualify as a female astronaut in China, you must be married and, preferably, be a mother. Not that either of those mattered to previous women in space. Now, other reports say a woman apparently can't have any tooth decay or scars and must have fresh breath. While health factors are taken into account for both men and women, some people on social media sites, like China's equivalent of Twitter, Sina Weibo, have called into question whether or not there's too much focus on unnecessary factors.
Zwei Premieren auf einmal. Am Samstag schickte China zum ersten Mal eine Taikonautin ins All. Und heute absolvierte das Raumschiff Shenzhou 9 das erste bemannte Andockmanöver Chinas. Mit Erfolg.
China greift weiter nach den Sternen. Am Samstag startete das bemannte Raumschiff Shenzhou 9. Es bringt erstmals eine Besatzung zu der experimentellen Raumstation Tiangong 1, die seit September vergangenen Jahres um die Erde kreist. Bei diesem Flug sollte das Andocken an Tiangong, den Himmelspalast, getestet werden. Nach erfolgreichem Manöver wird die Besatzung die nächsten 10 Tage im Testmodul verbringen und dort wissenschaftliche sowie technische Experimente durchführen. Neben 2 männlichen Taikonauten, chinesischen Astronauten, fliegt erstmals auch eine Frau mit ins All. Das Andockmanöver ist eine wichtige Etappe für die chinesische Raumfahrt. Mit dem Testmodul Tiangong 1 will China Erfahrung sammeln für den Aufbau einer eigenen bemannten Raumstation.
Was hat Fußball Deutschland gestern Abend mal wieder zittern müssen? Lange hätte beim Spiel gegen Dänemark ein Gegentor gereicht und die deutsche Nationalelf wäre aus dem EM-Turnier geflogen. Doch dann erlöste Lars Bender ja mit seinem Siegtor eine ganze Nation. In vielen Städten gingen die Feiern dann bis spät in die Nacht. Thomas Beikelt mit den Bildern.
Es war 22:20 Uhr, als sich in ganz Deutschland alle Anspannung entlädt.
Wir haben gewonnen!
Über 400.000 Menschen auf der Berliner Fanmeile, über 60.000 Menschen in Hamburg. Und den vielleicht schönsten Jubel gab es auf der Stadiontribüne in der Ukraine. Silvia Meichel, die Freundin von Mario Gomez. Und in Jogi Löws Heimat, leere Straßen, Riesenjubel in Schönau im Schwarzwald. Es gibt kein Halten mehr. Deutschland einig Jubelland. Der Einzug ins Viertelfinale kennt nur Superlativen.
Wir hatten so Aufregung, wir waren einfach total im Rausch.
Haben wir nebenbei schön getrunken, geguckt, war schön, ne?
Wir haben gewonnen und das ist gut so.
Und Deutschland gewinnt die EM und alle wissen das.
Mindestens Finale ist immer bei uns drin, immer.
Ja, wir haben keine Ahnung von Fußball, aber war geil, gute Stimmung.
Nelly, das Elefantenorakel aus dem Serengeti-Park Hodenhagen, hatte den richtigen Riecher im Rüssel, den Sieg gegen Dänemark vorausgesagt und ist nun durch 3 richtige Tipps das wohl aktuell erfolgreichste deutsche Tierorakel. Die Polizei würde sich freuen, wenn jemand ein Autokorso voraussagen könnte. Nach Spielschluss war gestern der Kurfürstendamm in Berlin 2 Stunden blockiert. Alles, was Räder hat, kam gefahren, egal in welcher Preisklasse. Wer jetzt genug hat von deutschen Fahren, bitte schauen wir nach Magdeburg. Dort gab es auch einen portugiesischen Autokorso, die ebenfalls ihren Einzug ins Viertelfinale feierten. Wie soll das erst werden, wenn wir alle ins Halbfinale einziehen?
Wir wollten es gerade sagen.
Genau.
Das ist die einzige Frage, die sich schon stellt. Deutschland im Ausnahmezustand.
Hauptsache, wir gewinnen.
Ja.